Good morning, Ajahns and friends. So my study topic is the effect of Google Classroom Assistant extensive listening on motivation and listening comprehension in lower secondary students. Here is the scope I'm going to talk about in my study. So move on to the background of the study. The first, I'm going to take a look on the goal of the Ministry of Education. As the Ministry of Education aim to develop the students' communicative competence. But we all know very well about the washback effect that teaching in Thailand was going contrastly to its aim to develop student competence in communicative skills. But most of us tend to go on the teacher center or the exam oriented, as that was the first problem we can see clearly. So the current problem is the widespread of English listening problem in Thailand, both on students and for the adult worker, as many studies have reported. Besides, many students are rarely taught how to listen effectively due to the belief that listening is just a receptive skill, that the student will receive them automatically from learning other skill, but actually it's not, because listening is an active skill that requires students to listen actively, as we know that hearing and listening are different. So students need attention in order to listen carefully and effectively. So that's the problem. While listening in activity in Thailand, we only taste their listening ability, but never teach them how to listen. As well as we tend to overlook the skill as the Cinderella skill, the minor skill, or undervalue it, as well as the lack of exposure to English due to the EFL status of English in Thailand. So English is taught in Thailand as the class in the class only, but outside of the classroom, most of the students rarely have the opportunity to practice their English outside of the classroom, especially listening skill. So students rarely have hand-on experience or the opportunity to practice their listening outside of the classroom. For extensive listening skill, the key features of extensive listening skill, or EL, is that EL will expose students to the vast amount or the massive amount of comprehensive spoken text over an expanded of time. That means students are supported to listen as much as they can, whenever they want, and to provide fun and enjoyable listening experience by allowing students to listen what they are interested. So the listening material will be based on student needs or interests. They can choose and they can find the one that they prefer. Next, EL will encourage students to listen for meaning instead of language form. That means the student will be supported to listen to the easy spoken text that will be a little bit beyond their potential or a little bit under their potential or their competence. And the next one is to improve the motivation and confidence in listening, as they are supported to choose easy text and the text that they like, so the student will be motivated to listen more and more, and from that they will gain more confidence in listening skill. To move on to the types of listening activity in EL, there are 5 types by Ivone and Renandria. The first one is just to listen only. The second one is the shadowing or overlapping while listening. Another name is active listening. This one the student will repeat after they hear the word or following the speech by repeating that word while they're listening. The third one is reading while listening. That means the student will read and listen the spoken text at the same time. The fourth type is listening and viewing, is watching video. The student will listen and watch at the same time. And number 5 is the mixed skill. The student will listen, viewing, and reading at the same time. For example, watch the video with subtitle. For this research, the research question is interest to study the effect of extensive listening using the listening log on student listening comprehension. That means this study will study the effect of listening, of extensive listening, that provide the student with listening log to write down what they have learned or what they have listened from the text, and to see its effect on their listening comprehension. The second is the platform between the traditional written and the Google Classroom, that which one can develop student motivation better. The study divides students into control and experimental group. So the control group will listen and write down in the paper provided, while the other group, the experimental one, will listen and write their answer in the Google Classroom. They can just type down. And number 3, to explore their perception on extensive listening. For the scope of the study, the first one, the population. The student will be divided into 2 classes. 60 students will be divided into 2 classes or 30 students per class. The students are in Soon Kulab Vithiyalai Nonthaburi School who are studying listening development subject, the elective subject. So the sampling will be chosen by purposive sampling from those who register in this elective course. The variables, the independent variable will be extensive listening and Google Classroom assisted, while the dependent variable will be listening comprehension and student motivation. The significance of the study. The first one is to emphasize on the listening development. As I mentioned before, that listening is the neglect skill in Thailand. Then at the end of the study, the author will provide material for listening both online and offline. And this one is only one of a few study about extensive listenings in Thailand. Next one is that to support the implementation of extensive listening in the classroom, and also this study will also support the student motivation in listening skill. For the research framework, as I mentioned before, the target group, the students will be divided into 2 groups, the experimental and the control group. While the experimental will use, both groups will use EL. However, the experimental one will use the Google Classroom assisted, but the control class will only use the traditional platform or the written paper in order to do that listening log only. And to start the implementation, first of all, as I mentioned, that extensive listening requires students to listen to their favorite topic or their under their potential or their competence. So the study will start from the questionnaire to see the student needs and then develop or design the material from their needs analysis. Then to start the implementation, the study will start from pre-test student comprehensive. Then implement or give the treatment for 12 weeks. Then do the post-test. After finish the implementation, the interval will be gathered from the participants by selective purposes, and then the data will be interpreted and reported. The data will use the triangulated from Creswell in 2008, as the data will be interpreted from both quantitative and qualitative data and analyzed in triangulate way. For the research methodology, as I mentioned before, so before the implementation, the needs analysis will be gathered from questionnaire, then decide the listening material. The 12 weeks implementation will be given, and then after the implementation, the interval will be gathered. From the data analysis, to answer number 1 question, the effect of extensive listening on student comprehension, the listening comprehension pre-test and post-test will be analyzed, as well as the listening log or the assignment that students were given before and after the treatment. And then the Wilcoxon rank test and descriptive statistics will be used. Then to answer the research question number 2, to see which platform will develop student motivation better between traditional written and Google Classroom assisted, the questionnaire and the semi-structured interval after the treatment will be used, and the data analysis will use content analysis. As well as in number 3 question, the perception of students toward extensive listening will also be analyzed from the questionnaire and the semi-structured interval after the treatment using the content analysis. For the research plan, the research will start from conduct information, the literature review, then propose the niche and research question, decide the questionnaire, and the treatment, the small pilot, revise the questionnaire and the course outline before collect the data analysis, and finalize step by final thesis defense. Here is some of my reference. Thank you for your listening. Anyway, please feel free to give your comment, your questions to my study. I would love to hear from you all.